Tonight at 10, any changes to the lockdown measures in England should be made in a cautious but irreversible way, according to Boris Johnson. While 15 million people have now received their first COVID vaccine, infection rates, according to experts, are still far too high. Plans for easing restrictions in England will be set out next Monday, including target dates for reopening certain sectors.
We want this lockdown to be the last, and we want progress to be cautious, but also irreversible.
Experts say that the 7-day average of COVID deaths is still high, but it is below the peak of the first wave. Also tonight, inside one of the hotel rooms set aside for a 10-day quarantine for those entering England from COVID high-risk countries. In Yemen, we report on the horrific plight of children in the country's long-running civil war.
You can go from building to building here, from family to family, and hear more stories of children that have been deliberately targeted by snipers.
Bill Gates, the Microsoft founder and philanthropist, talks to us about the innovation that is needed to tackle climate change. And in Chennai, England are heading for defeat in the second test against India.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, West Ham's push for Champions League football next season continues after beating struggling Sheffield United 3-0.
Good evening. Any changes to the lockdown measures in England should be made in a cautious but irreversible way, according to Boris Johnson. The Prime Minister hoping next Monday to set out his plans for easing restrictions, including target dates for reopening certain sectors. But he warned there was no cast-iron guarantee that the plans wouldn't have to change. While 15 million people have now received their first COVID vaccine, experts say that infection rates are still far too high. We'll have more on the vaccine programme in just a few minutes. But first, the latest on the restrictions from our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth.
It seems a while since school playgrounds were noisy, since these empty pubs were bustling. Next week, we'll find out when and how some of this might start to return. For so many families, it's been a long wait.
Missing work, missing just hugging people, really.
Oh, that side.
Driving instructor Harvey's business has been parked. His daughter Grace can't go to school, and they haven't seen parents and grandparents for months.
Really, it's been about a year since we've actually had them down here to stop, and nobody's getting any younger. So you just think, well, let's hope. But I just don't want to rush it and be back in this position again.
That's what he is trying to avoid, even with good vaccine news, urging caution.
We want this lockdown to be the last, and we want progress to be cautious, but also irreversible.
They're waiting for more data before decisions about opening up. Crucial is the effect of the vaccine on the virus and death rates.
I think the earliest indications would imply there's some effect, but I think it's too early to be able to put a number on that. Obviously, Israel is particularly far ahead in its vaccination programme, and there is some evidence of effects.
When things do begin to relax, schools will be the priority. It's hoped they'll start back in 3 weeks in England. More outdoor meetings could come next, followed by some shops opening, then possibly pubs and restaurants. But there's no fixed timetable or firm plan yet. Scotland and Northern Ireland are going at their own pace, and from Wales, a warning: there can be no absolutes.
Prime Minister, you say you want this to be the last lockdown, but can you really give that guarantee given the unpredictable nature of this pandemic?
No, I can't give that guarantee. Of course not. People should be very, very much encouraged by what's going on at the moment, but we want to set out a timetable that is realistic, and that means one that is obviously cautious.
All the time restrictions last, Labour says there must be support.
If we are to ease out of lockdown with caution, you need to put these other measures in place to stop the spread of the virus, like paying people sick pay, like ventilating buildings. I think if you do that, then this can be the final lockdown, and it has to be the final lockdown.
With the fast rollout of vaccines, there's pressure from some Tory MPs to ease restrictions quickly by May. But the Prime Minister's been accused of getting people's hopes up, over-promising then under-delivering at other points in this pandemic. Downing Street doesn't want to open up just to have to close down again. They know politically, and for the sake of public health and confidence, they have to get this right. For holiday and hospitality businesses, it means no certainty just yet. This caravan park in Cornwall has a backlog of bookings, but still isn't sure when people can come.
We are now fully booked for Easter, which is fantastic news, and that is 50 families desperate to come and have a holiday and have a respite.
We will know more about the possibilities next week, but for now nothing is set in stone, so much still up in the air. Well, the Prime Minister is expected to set out more details of his plan to ease restrictions next Monday, and it's thought that will include some dates which will mark the starting point at which various sectors might be able to begin opening up. But Downing Street's really keen to stress that nothing is definite, and it will all depend on the progress of the virus. They're going to keep a very close eye on the data. But while the Prime Minister was keen to stress a really cautious note, he did also point to the advances in science, of course the vaccine programme, but also treatments and testing, even suggesting that there could down the line be tests to get into nightclubs, quick turnaround, or for things like theatres. That's all a long way off, but it does point to the fact that even when things start to open, we could live with the effects of this virus for some time.
Alex, many thanks once again. Alex Forsyth with the latest at Westminster. Well, the United Kingdom has more than met the vaccines target set 6 weeks ago. The Prime Minister said today that if supplies held up, vaccinations would be offered to everyone in the top 9 priority groups by the end of April, including those aged over 65 and younger people with underlying health conditions. But there is concern in some groups, people with asthma or those with learning difficulties, for example, that they weren't included in the first phase. Our health editor Hugh Pym has more details.
Thank you very much. Hi, good morning.
Visiting a vaccination centre today, the Prime Minister was keen to praise all those involved in getting more than 15 million people in the UK inoculated with the first dose.
If you look at what's happened in the last few weeks, it's been an unbelievable effort by the NHS and the doctors, the nurses, the GP surgeries, the hospitals. Of course, the army has been fantastic. The pharmacists have done a great job.
Warehouse workers and logistics experts helped get the vaccines to hospitals, doctors, surgeries and other hubs. This company's drivers covered more than 200,000 miles in 2 months, delivering more than 5 million vaccines in England. People aged 70 and over, NHS and care staff and residents, and those who are clinically extremely vulnerable were in the first target groups. On Friday, the Welsh Government was the first in the UK to report that everyone in the top 4 priority groups had been offered a first dose of the vaccine. Since then, ministers in England and Scotland have also confirmed that target has been hit. In Northern Ireland, officials say everyone in those groups will have been offered it by the end of this month. From today, the next priority groups will be offered vaccinations, starting with the 65 to 69 age range, nearly 3 million people. Then comes those under 65 with underlying health conditions, more than 7 million. Next will be the 60 to 64-year-olds, nearly 2 million. And then those in their 50s, more than 5 million, with a target of more than 17 million in the UK by the end of April. Some with asthma, like Ellie, who has to use her inhaler 4 times a day, didn't know whether they'd be considered part of the priority group with health conditions. She says the communication's been poor.
For me personally, it's just been the confusion over whether or not you qualify for the vaccine. It's been a pretty stressful couple of months.
Officials have said those with severe asthma will be offered jabs at this stage. Others, like Ellie, are deemed to be lower risk.
Come on, good boy.
Amanda, who has mild learning disabilities, said there was also confusion for her and others about getting the vaccine.
I was told I couldn't have it to begin with, and then I just kept ringing my GP and I still got nowhere. And this morning I phoned and they said that I could go to the local town hall and have it done.
All this means the latest phase could be more complex than before. with the added pressure of people from the first wave of vaccinations needing their second dose. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
It's time to have a look at the latest government figures, and there were 9,765 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. An average of 12,580 new cases were recorded per day in the past week. 23,341 people are in hospital with COVID across the UK. In the last 24 hours, 230 deaths have been recorded. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. 657 deaths were announced on average every day in the past week. And the total number of people who've died so far is 117,396. That brings us to the latest numbers on vaccinations. 237,962 people had a first dose of one of the two available COVID vaccines in the latest 24-hour period, which takes the number of people who have now had their first jab to 15,300,151. So now that I've gone through those figures, let's talk to our medical editor, Fergus Walsh. The Prime Minister said today that the number of infections was still far too high. Having said that, there are lots of positive signs in the figures.
Hugh, yeah, the daily cases are actually at their lowest level now since early October. On the flip side, there are still nearly 3,000 patients on ventilators and 1,600 people a day being admitted to hospital with COVID, and still more patients in hospital than at the peak last April. But this time round, of course, we have the vaccine and we have the first very tentative signs of the impact it may be having on reducing the risk of dying. Mortality rates among the over 80s are falling much faster than among younger age groups, and of course they were the first group to be immunised, but the data is still very early. We need 1 or 2 weeks more data to be sure about that. Now, Israel, which is further ahead in its immunisation rollout than even the UK, where they're using the Pfizer jab, have shown that 2 doses seems to prevent nearly all symptomatic infection and severe illness, which is really encouraging. But scientists advising the government would like to see a very cautious approach to lifting restrictions with a 3-week gap between each measure, like opening schools, because it will then allow them to ensure that the impact of that can be gauged, because what everybody wants is for this to be the last lockdown.
Indeed. Fergus, thanks very much again. Fergus Walsh there, our medical editor. Well, anyone who has arrived in England today after being in a COVID high-risk country now has to quarantine in a government-approved hotel. The list of 33 countries includes Portugal, Brazil and South Africa. The aim is to stop new COVID variants from entering England under this range of policies. Government has secured just under 5,000 rooms in 16 hotels, and people will have to pay £1,750 to quarantine for the 10-day period. Anyone breaking the rules could face fines of up to £10,000. In Scotland, the rule applies for travellers returning from all countries. Our transport correspondent Caroline Davis has been talking to some of the first travellers staying in the new quarantine hotels.
A different arrival to the UK. Some of the first passengers destined for quarantine hotels escorted out of the airport through photographers' flashes and on to their rooms.
Coaches have been arriving throughout the course of the morning, bringing passengers from Heathrow Airport to the quarantine hotels. Everybody on board will have declared that they've been in a red list country in the course of the last 10 days.
Guests won't leave these walls for 11 nights or 10 full days. But for those arriving today, there was some company outside their windows.
How's the room?
Good, thanks. Yeah, it's okay.
Vian Mayer flew from South Africa via Qatar. He's starting a new job here in March, and his visa only started today. He says that passengers that travelled from red list countries and those that didn't were together on the flight and in the airport.
I was probably about 2 seats from someone that doesn't come from a red list country. We're all in the same vicinity, breathing the same air.
He split the room with a friend for the 11 nights.
We're either going to come out as really good friends or we're going to hate each other. So I guess only time will tell. Windows, unfortunately, don't open. It would have been nice to maybe just get some fresh air in every now and then. Not particularly looking forward to the next 11 days, but yeah, just hoping it goes by quickly.
There are no international flights into Northern Ireland or Wales at the moment, but those flying into Scotland have to quarantine regardless of which international country they started from. Chun Wong and his 8-year-old daughter flew in from America this morning to be reunited with his wife after 16 months apart.
I got my COVID shots already. Whatever it takes to make everybody safe, I'm all for it.
They'll have to wait another 10 days before all three can be together as a family again. There is a loophole for Scottish arrivals. If they fly into England and they haven't come from a red list country, they're expected to isolate at home, not a hotel. The Scottish Government want them to be put up in English hotels. Negotiations on that are ongoing. Early indications suggest that the number of passengers flying into the UK today was low and that the queues were relatively short. But there are concerns that new checks will mean delays, which could be a risk to passengers and staff.
Every additional check the officer has to do slows up that transaction, increases the risk of infection to the officer and to the traveller from the officer. And then as those queues build, of course, the different planes mixing with one another, that builds up, that increases the risk from traveller to traveller that the virus will just spread.
The government say that every step is taken to reduce risks and to minimise any potential for passenger interaction, and that some airports, including Heathrow, have introduced additional measures to separate passengers from red list destinations before immigration. The policy doesn't have an end date, and the number of countries on the red list could still get longer. So these hotels may well see more passengers through their doors in the next few weeks and months. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
In Yemen, where the civil war has lasted 6 years, human rights workers say more than 400 children have been targeted by sniper fire in just one city. That city is Taiz, under fire from Houthi rebel forces. It's now one of the most dangerous places in the country and one of the most dangerous to be a child. The Houthis deny targeting children. Well, Taiz is in the southwest of Yemen. It's home to one of the longest running battles in the conflict. It's under virtual siege, divided between government forces. They are supported by a coalition which is led by the Saudis and backed by the UK and until recently by the US. And then the Houthis, backed by Iran, who control most of the population. Our international correspondent Ola Gerin, cameraman Gökte Goltan and producer Claire Reid sent this report, which contains some distressing images.
In Taiz, city of snipers, a family on the front line. Ruwaida Saleh is 8 years old. Her big brother, Amri, is 10. She probably owes him her life. Here she lay last August after she was shot in the head. Who took aim and pulled the trigger? Her family have no doubt. A Houthi sniper. It was Amri who dragged her to safety.
كنت أنا أسحب الدبة من الشارع ورجعت العدو العاب كان مروح أقود ركنا رمي بالراس عفتوا حالة العدو سلم الشارع والقناص كان رمي عليا.
Ruwaida arrived in hospital unconscious and had to have brain surgery. We reported on her story then, but couldn't reach her. Now we have. She's still trapped in a city at war, and it's taking its toll, says her father, Salah bin Salah.
رويدة كم خايفة على نفسي نقول له روحي اشتري لك حاجات متميش تقول له بلا يعني خايفة من سمعت ضرب الرصاص قال نقاي أنا إني تصب مرة ثانية صحة رويدة تتشكل بس إني لما ترقد ما تقدرش ترقد لأن عادها تعبانة من رأسي من الجهة أنا عادها تعبانة عادي يعني لما جيت ترقد ما تقدرش ترقد جلست هز رأسي.
In front of the family's home, right where Ruwaida was shot, kids just want to be kids. Her attack caused outrage. Since then, snipers have left the children alone on this street. Under armed escort, we travelled to another frontline area. Human rights workers document every attack. They say Houthi snipers have killed or injured more than 450 children in Taiz. Houthi officials say allegations of targeting children are completely false and come from their opponents. The makeshift barricades are to block the snipers' line of sight. Well, we have to move carefully here and take cover in these frontline districts. Nowhere is safe and no one is spared, especially, it seems, the children. You can go from building to building here, from family to family, and hear more stories of children that have been deliberately targeted by snipers. One father wanted to tell us his story, so we followed Abdu Qaid Ahmed to his home. He runs this risk every day. So do his children. This photo of 10-year-old Saber was taken last April. Days later, he was dead. Abdu tells me Saber was shot out of a tree after climbing to pick fruit. The bullet passed through his body. Saber's younger brother, Mohammed, was there and saw him die. He got shot in the stomach. The 7-year-old made it home and hid under a blanket, too scared to tell their mother, Fatia, they had climbed the tree.
اكتشف انه قدمت مجمع بعد البطاني ونقوا من اخي هم خلاص هم صيحه صيحه صيح رجعوا الجيران شلوا من حدفي وندوخ في ساعتين هم صيحه قل لهم دوري صابر ان حسبنا خابئ مني لا ضربوا لما بزي اخوه وهو قهوه والثلاجه وانا ما دروكش انا قاحني.
While Mohammed survived, he's deeply traumatized. His mother says when he's not happy, he tells her, I'll go to the sniper so he can shoot me again. Across Yemen, the young are at risk from all sides, and death often comes from the skies. Airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition, which supports the Yemeni government and is backed by the UK, kill many children. Human rights workers here in Taiz say the difference is Houthi snipers are systematically trying to kill them. Back in Ruwaida's neighbourhood, a young boy plays dead. Hard to watch. Too often here, it's not a game. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Taiz.
Orla there with hard evidence of the plight of so many children in Yemen's long-running civil war. Some more of the day's news. A High Court judge is considering whether it was unlawful to award a government contract to a company with links to the Prime Minister's advisor at that time, Dominic Cummings. More than £500,000 of taxpayers' money was paid to the firm Public First at the start of the pandemic. Mr Cummings was a friend of the firm's bosses. Lawyers for the government say that Mr Cummings had recommended the company during a time of national emergency, but they say he did not make the final decision on the contract. Jaguar Land Rover has announced that it will produce electric vehicles only from 2025. Moving away from the internal combustion engine, the company said that by the end of the decade, all of its cars, including Land Rover models, would be powered by electricity to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2039. It also said it has no plans to close any manufacturing facilities in the UK. In Myanmar, the country formerly known as Burma, military leaders have warned protesters that they could face up to 20 years in prison if they obstruct the armed forces. Demonstrators are still taking to the streets after the army stepped in 2 weeks ago, rejecting the re-election of the civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. And tonight, the country is experiencing a near-total internet shutdown, and that is for a second night in succession. Our correspondent Jonathan Head has the latest.
Even for a country shocked at being back under military rule, it has been a stressful 24 hours. Rumours of a full-scale army operation were strong, and here in the town of Myitkyina, Repeated bursts of gunfire from the security forces made people think it was already happening. Most of the shots, though, were fired into the air. Then an 8-hour nationwide internet blackout. For what purpose, we still aren't clear. This morning, the military was making itself visible in Yangon and other cities. That didn't stop people from protesting again over their power grab, as they have for the past 10 days. If anything, the soldiers provoked people to speak out even more over seeing their democracy crushed by the generals. This armoured vehicle found itself surrounded by hostile traffic, the drivers honking their anger. And here at the headquarters of the party led by Aung San Suu Kyi, more anger. Release our leaders, they shouted at the police surrounding the building. They haven't forgotten that they re-elected her by a landslide just 3 months ago. She's still in military custody, her detention extended today for who knows how long. The military's plans from now are hard to guess. The soldiers, though, are an ominous sign. These are combat units used to fight armed insurgents on Myanmar's borders and in previous unrest to shoot protesters. And they're back on the streets again. Jonathan Head, BBC News.
Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft and one of the world's most prominent philanthropists, says that tackling the global pandemic will appear very, very easy compared with the challenge posed by climate change. He says innovation will have to play a very big role, but that governments around the world must send clear signals to industry that change has to come if net zero carbon emissions are to be achieved. Mr. Gates has been speaking to our chief environment correspondent, Justin Rowlatt.
Shuttered shops and bankrupt businesses are one tragic legacy of the coronavirus pandemic. It's why governments around the world are talking about stimulus packages to kickstart their economies. And today, Bill Gates told the BBC he believes tackling climate change should be a key part of this effort to build back better.
If you look in the history of the physical economy, we've never made a transition like we're talking about doing in the next 30 years. There is no precedent for this. And so if we don't do something amazing and surprising with all sorts of innovative policies, then we will not get there.
One policy could be to change the tax system, because at the moment it sends some confusing signals.
Despite the government's drive to reduce emissions, you pay the same 20% VAT if you buy an emission-free electric vehicle as if you buy the petrol or diesel equivalent. Or how about this? You pay 20% VAT on a solar panel, but only 5% VAT if you buy polluting coal to heat your home.
A green energy company is leading a campaign demanding the government introduces a zero VAT rating for green products and services at the next budget.
The UK has just left the EU, and with that comes much more freedom on how we set our taxes. And we think the Chancellor should use that freedom to remove VAT on green products. We don't think families should be taxed for choosing green options, and we think that green technology should be available to everyone.
And that includes developing countries, says the new head of the World Trade Organization. She says wealthy nations need to make good their promises to help finance decarbonisation.
So how do we use carbon taxes, for instance? And all these have to be done bearing in mind that poor countries and developing countries, they will need time to transition, and also the resources they need to transition to low carbon emission economies has to be found.
The challenges may be huge, but Bill Gates says he's optimistic that the world can succeed in avoiding a climate disaster.
I'm hopeful because young people care about natural ecosystems, they care about people's livelihoods, but it's not going to be easy, and my optimism requires every year that this be a huge priority, and that with the innovations, you know, we get a bit lucky, and some of them really do solve the hard areas.
Ending the pandemic isn't just easy compared to fixing the climate, says Bill Gates. It is very, very easy. That's why he believes if we do manage to solve global warming, it will be the most amazing thing humanity has ever done. Justin Rolat, BBC News.
Let's catch up with some cricket, and England are heading for defeat in the second test against India in Chennai. Set a rather daunting target of 482 to win. England lost early wickets to end the day on 53 for 3. Our correspondent Joe Wilson was watching the play.
Batting in Chennai was near impossible, the pitch near unplayable. Remember, no one told those two. After a naught in the first innings, it was unthinkable Virat Kohli would fail this time.
Shot.
Well, certainly unthinkable for him. But who's this? What's that? Ravichandran Ashwin, having out-bowled England, was now out-batting them. Born and bred in this city, spectators loved his 50. Well, hold something back. England spin bowlers stuck at it. Kohli LBW to Moeen Ali out for 62. But Ashwin was still batting, still bashing.
He's absolutely nailed that.
Spectators still counting. Not much evidence of social distance, but vivid excitement. He's close to 100. Just one more swing of the bat.
He has done it.
And that seemed like the ultimate expression of India's position, until their worst batsman started hitting sixes. Mohammad Siraj, last man in, biggest shot of the day. England's team, like an Apollo 11, now chase an uncharted target. Well, Joe, 482 to win, or 10 wickets for India. Suitable conditions for expert bowlers. It happens everywhere.
Big appeal and given.
3 wickets here by the close, one of them for the Chennai champion. And Ravichandran will surely end with a win. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
That's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.